Muir the eagle beast had a snake venom attack and was no longer able to walk. Lying helplessly on the ground, the leopard beast proposes to send Muir back to BC first, but Muir knows that only the snake beast can cure the snake venom. He told the leopard beast not to waste their efforts. Saving the females was important, but the leopard beast had little fight in that. Curtis is a tattooed beast and we are only tattooed, so it seems the mission is not going to be completed. At that moment the other leopard beast returned, and the duo busily asked what they had found. The leopard pulled out a leaf-wrapped snake scale, the very one I had plucked from Curtis' tail. Muir stared blankly at the snake scales, the feeling of coming back from the dead indescribable at this point. Muir was already somewhat delirious, and only vaguely heard a phrase about the scales smelling like females. On the other hand, Curtis was carrying me in the direction of the sea, and it was about to rain. Curtis found a cave and went in to get out of the rain. I pushed through the vines to get in, but the cave already had an unwelcome visitor. By the time I got a good look at it, the thing pounced, and it turned out to be a well-fed tiger. In the nick of time, Curtis had pulled me behind him. Curtis took the form of a snake and threw out his long tail, wrapping the tiger in a death grip. As Curtis slowly tightened, it wasn't long before the tiger gave out. I remembered that Parker had been pestered like this once, and a tightening pain went through my heart. Curtis had changed back to his human form by now, and he looked back at me in great confusion. I just looked panicked and shaking, sitting on the floor not knowing what I was thinking about. Curtis rushed forward and gave me a hug. "Don't be afraid, it's okay." I hurriedly pushed Curtis away and whispered, "I'm fine. Let go of me." Curtis cupped my little head and said, "We have food for today. I'll build a fire and cook for you." The rainstorm came as promised, and I got soaked. Curtis looked at my soaked hair, fearing that I was sick. Curtis was going to give me a haircut, and I was so startled that I rushed to protect my beloved hair with my hands. Curtis was very insistent. "You'll catch a cold. You won't catch a cold if you cut it all off." I quickly dodged backwards, explaining that it wouldn't. It would dry in a minute. I washed my hair all the time. Curtis looked at me half-heartedly, confirming that the female was telling the truth. "All right, I'll go eat then. Do you want the rest of the tiger meat?" I'm suddenly curious. How does Curtis eat? At that moment, a snake animal feeding struggle began on the walls of the cave, with the python curling up the tiger with its body. Then a bite was taken and slowly swallowed, and in a short while the tiger was all swallowed into the python's stomach. I was so scared I was busy turning my head back. I was mentally prepared, but it was just as scary. It's late at night and the fire's out, but the rain won't stop. A cold rainy night. A man and a snake sleeping together. A cold wind woke me up. I got up and felt my throat, which was so sore that I feared I had caught a cold. Suddenly, Curtis wrapped his arms around me from behind. I still couldn't get used to the sudden clearing of the air and blushed involuntarily, then pushed Curtis, trying to avoid it. "I'm not going to sleep. Let me get up." The wind is getting stronger and stronger, blowing the vines up. I got goosebumps from the cold and rubbed my hands together and said, "I'm so cold." Curtis responded immediately and I went to build a fire. Soon Curtis had a fire going for me. Curtis wrapped his arms around me from behind. "This rain looks like it's going to last a long time. Let's build snake eggs while we're at it." I immediately refused, and Curtis caressed my chin and said, "The rain will wash away our scent. They won't find you. Don't even think about leaving me." My little brain spun rapidly, and I finally decided to pretend to be sick to get through it, only to see my body go limp and fall into Curtis' arms. Breathless, "I'm not feeling well." Curtis hurriedly turned me around, anxiously asking what was wrong. Then all of a sudden he puts his face to it and says, "I know you're cold. Mating will warm you up. Let's get started." I was dumbfounded. What logic? I was so anxious I cried in case it didn't work. At this Curtis gave a start, and seeing that it had an effect, I hastened to add, "Curtis, what if I die of cold and exhaustion afterwards?" Curtis gave it some deep thought and thought it made sense. I went on, "You don't give a shit what I'm not." Without waiting for me to finish, Curtis interrupted and then anxiously explained, "I just want you to be a good boy. I don't care." My little mouth pouted. "I don't believe it. Yesterday they said they wanted me to have a litter a year." Curtis held his face close to mine and softly explained, "Females love babies. I thought maybe you like me just because of them." I thought to myself, I don't care about baby snakes. Then try carefully. "So, do you still want to mate with me now?" "No." "Do you want to eat some yellow stems to make you hot?" It had been raining for 3 days, but it finally cleared up, and I stretched my limbs against the sunlight, and suddenly many brightly colored poisonous mushrooms were found growing under the tree. I had a plan. If I poisoned Curtis, wouldn't I be able to escape? The next second I wavered. No, what if I poisoned him? Suddenly Curtis' voice came from behind him. "That one is poisonous and inedible." I blushed and got weak. "I'm picking up my words, aren't I? I'll look for something else." Curtis frowned, grabbed my hand and said, I told you it was toxic. Don't be ridiculous. I pointed to the black fungus on the trunk and said, this isn't poisonous. I'll eat it. Lovely. Curtis did some fruitless searching of his memory banks and wondered if there was any poison. I added that this myself had been fine since I was a kid. Curtis compromises, but only if he eats first. A pot of mushroom soup is about to come out. I chucked a mushroom and fed it to Curtis' mouth. Curtis added, Kuro can give me one to eat too. Then I anxiously asked, can I eat it now? Curtis told him to wait. He's fine with eating. I'm eating. Suddenly Curtis' face changed and his expression became pained. I can't believe it. Is it really poisonous? Only to see Curtis' body shake uncontrollably, then uncontrollably fall to the ground. Curtis curled up on the ground and kept convulsing, that immense pain causing him to change back to his original form. He had lost all control of himself, and his writhing serpentine body sent the burning wood flying, and the soup on the fire was knocked over on the ground. I called out Curtis' name anxiously. At this point Curtis had only one thing on his mind. He couldn't hurt me. Curtis growled through the excruciating pain and told me to stay away. Then Curtis dragged his long snake bite and crawled swiftly out of the cave. I followed and saw Curtis on the floor, twisting madly. I'm on the verge of tears with anxiety. I didn't mean it. Just as the words came out of his mouth, he suddenly realized that this was the perfect opportunity to escape. But will he die? The struggle rages on in my head. It didn't take long for Curtis to calm down, and suddenly the snake's head turned towards me, and when he saw that I hadn't left, a big stone finally fell to the ground in his heart. Curtis slowly morphed back into his original form and walked over to me, thankfully, and said, it's a good thing you didn't eat it. I was very surprised that he didn't blame me at all. Suddenly my nose turned sour and I shed a tear. Sobbing, I'm sorry. Curtis hugged me and comforted me. I'm glad you're okay. I'm glad you're not mad at me for spoiling your food. Looking at the powerful man in front of me, so humble for himself, could not help but eyes wet. How can you be so stupid? A soft smile filled Curtis' eyes as he watched me worry about myself. Curtis took my hand as soon as he could and reassured me that it was okay and that it would be okay soon. I calmed down emotionally slowly, realizing that in all this time, Curtis hadn't seemed angry with himself once. And when you think about those modern men, Curtis really is so much better. Since then I don't seem to be quite the same as I was before. And they walked forward hand in hand, like a real couple. The two of them returned to the cave and couldn't help but be filled with sadness when they saw the mess on the ground. Curtis thoughtfully asked me to wait outside until he was cleaned up and came back. But as a modern woman, I'm not as delicate as the females of this world. And with a firm gaze I said, I'll clean up with you. Curtis looked at me from behind as I busied myself and thought to himself, what a nice female I am. He seems to be treating me a little differently. Suddenly, my foot stepped on a fire that hadn't been completely extinguished, and I screamed. Curtis picked me up with a quick hand and asked with concern, was it burned? I smiled reassuringly. It's nothing, just some hot faggots. Curtis gently placed me on a rock. Curtis said seriously, be a good boy and don't move or I'll kiss you. Upon hearing this, I immediately did an honest job of sitting as taught by my kindergarten teacher. Curtis was slightly lost. Did he dislike me kissing him that much? Suddenly Curtis pulled me in for a strong kiss, and I was caught off guard and said in a kiss. All you could feel was your rolling cheeks and wildly beating heart. I covered my mouth in panic and said, rogue beast. Curtis fled out of the cave in a huff. My eyes suddenly fell on the fungus on the ground, and I wondered inwardly, were all the fungi in this world poisonous? No way. I can't mistake the fungus. It should be the white mushrooms. I cooked the two mushrooms separately this time, whispering hesitantly that I still wanted the fungus. Curtis didn't hesitate. Well, I'll try again. I just ate two of them, and I don't know which one is poisonous. I immediately waved my hand. No, 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 no. I'll just try it, or find a rabbit or something to test the poison. Curtis sat with slight embarrassment that no animals ate this. The soup was soon ready, and Curtis snatched a piece of wood ear, making sure nothing was wrong before handing me the soup. A pain went through me. Curtis was really quite nice. On the other hand, Parker is still anxiously waiting for news from me at the Beastmaster's fortress. When you see them coming back, run up to them. How's it going? Did you find them? The returning leopard handed Parker the herd of hides it had found. Parker instantly recognized that it was the very same one that he himself had sewn for me. Where was my other? The two men explained that the snake was powerful and cunning, and that they had lost it. The two men went on to advise Parker that it would be better to wait for the Leopard King to return before going to the rescue. Thinking of his beloved girl, Parker gripped the dress in his hand tightly. He really couldn't wait a moment longer. Parker defied the crowd and resolutely set off on his own. At the moment, I was strolling through the forest, dancing with the colorful butterflies, with Curtis following behind like a personal bodyguard. Suddenly, I snapped my fingers. No good. My physiological period is approaching. I jerked my head back to look at Curtis. What about the time when Curtis would surely ask me to lay his snake eggs? Curtis was happily painting me a picture of the beach and saying I would love it. I just responded with a listless "oh," my mind still thinking of ideas. Curtis surmised that I should be hungry, and then skillfully gathered wood for the pot, and everything went smoothly. On the sidelines, I'm racking my brain trying to figure out what to do about my period. Suddenly I had a flash of insight. There was a way to cry in pain, but it was better than laying snake eggs. I took a big step towards the beach. I probed with my toes first. The water temperature was so cold, but I didn't flinch at all. I looked ahead with a firm gaze, step by step, until your entire body is soaked in seawater. I keep cheering myself on. Hang in there. I've heard that getting cold during physiology can cause endocrine disruption, so I hope it works. I turn around, and Curtis, who was there cooking, is gone. Turning around again, I realized he was right beside me. Turns out the snake beast washed the water and followed me when he saw me go under, splashing around in the water with the girl he loves is the best thing Curtis can hope for. He wrapped his arms around me and gazed deeply, but I pushed Curtis away and went deeper, and tried to beat him away with the cooking, and then turned around and there was no sign of Curtis again. Suddenly, Curtis sprang out from underwater and carried me up. Curtis turned back for me to hold on to, and then in a burst of divine serpentine, he swam quickly across the surface of the sea. I had the feeling of being on a speedboat, and finally a smile on my face. And so one man and one snake spent one of the happiest afternoons in the blue water. It was not until darkness fell that the two men came ashore from the water with great interest. I've been looking at Curtis with a smile in my eyes ever since. The man is simply wonderful. On this day, Curtis was walking through the woods with me in his arms as usual, when suddenly a herd of animals hurried and ran wildly in front of us, as if something was chasing behind them. Curious, I asked Curtis if they were migrating. Curtis felt something. After a moment, Curtis said, "It should be a wave of beasts approaching us." I asked again what a tidal wave was. Curtis patiently explained that a tidal wave is a swarm of giant animals. They are large and powerful, and the crystals I paid the goat beasts for were obtained from within the behemoths. I let out a long breath. Okay, you can beat it. But Curtis' eyes flashed with a hint of worry. I was not afraid before, but now there is Bai. We must be extremely careful. Then I was told that it was too dangerous to get damp, and that I had to wait until they were gone before making the journey. I nodded my head and said yes. Seeing how well behaved I was, Curtis couldn't resist rubbing my head. Suddenly he heard something move and jerked his head back to look. Not noticing anything, he looked around again, watching Curtis move, and I was busy asking what was wrong. Curtis withdrew his gaze suspiciously and said in a low voice, "It's okay, probably a mistake, just out of sight of them. In a tree, Muir the hawk is staring at us." Muir thought to himself that he had actually spotted the beast tied so quickly. The four striped beasts were really powerful. Along the way, Muir was in the air, trailing the two of us, taking advantage of the gap between Curtis placing me on the rock and leaving. He suddenly launched himself into an attack, swooping down towards me. I also seemed to sense something strange behind me and jerked my head up. The oncoming giant baby scared me so much that my eyes widened. I instinctively squeezed my eyes shut and kept shouting for Curtis. A long tail flashed out, looked around me, and lifted me up in the air. Then Curtis ran all the way to get me to safety. After putting me down gently, he turned and charged towards the Black Hawk, who was in hot pursuit. Muir has learned his lesson from last time and dodges in time to use his aerial advantage well. Dodging again and again, Curtis landed several strikes and slowly stopped his attack and just went on the defensive. Seeing this, Muir actually hovered over Curtis and threatened to give him to me or I would kill him. Curtis was instantly alert and hastily shielded me with his snake body, saying coldly, "How dare you?" I'm confused. What kind of logic is this? How does killing me threaten Curtis? Muir's next words gave an explanation. The honor of the Eagle clan is inviolable. My mission can only be accomplished and not lost. Curtis stormed out, "Death to anyone who harmed White," then stormed out to attack Black Hawk. but Curtis' rushing attack was easily caught by Muir, dodging and managing to scorch Curtis at the same time. Then Muir flew away, with a final threat that it would be hard to save her, but easy to kill her. Watching Muir's back as he left, the glooming Curtis' eyes grew thicker and thicker, his crimson eyes almost dripping with blood. I walked over to Curtis, who had taken human form, and said worriedly, "You're bleeding." Curtis wrapped his arms around me in an almost pleading hug and said, "Don't leave me. Nothing can happen to you." Muir was flying high in the sky when he saw a plume of smoke rising from the forest, and then the smoke led me to Parker, who had gone out alone to look for me. He asked coldly, "Are you alone? Your father didn't come." Parker was glad to see Muir. "Finally, father hasn't returned to town yet. Did you find Turnip?" Muir grimaced and turned away, telling Parker my approximate location in the process. Parker got up and was about to go to me when Muir discouraged him. "Don't go. It's a death sentence. I have a way to get your female back." Parker was instantly elated. "What a way to go. I'll go with you." Muir looked at Parker's animal tattoo and frowned. Parker busily asked what's wrong. Muir said without looking back, "Nothing. You don't have to come." Then he flew up in the air and left. Looking at the hawk beasts flying away, Parker couldn't help but spit. "The lonely hawk clan deserves to have no females like you." Then deciding to go on to me alone, Parker didn't forget to put out the fire with dirt before he left. At this point, Curtis found a cave with a narrow entrance. He said to me gently, "With these boulders to protect us, the beasts can't come in, so I'll let you down tonight." Diligently, I've been laying grass and turning back and saying, "It's okay, safety first." Suddenly, a familiar wailing sound reached my ears. I snapped my head back and saw none other than Parker, who I hadn't seen in a long time. At the entrance to the cave, Parker shouted happily, "It's me!" And I was thrilled to see Parker, who I hadn't seen in a long time. Curtis was instantly alert when he saw Parker, and he declared his sovereignty as he hugged me. Parker shouted at Curtis to let go of me. "He's not here to fight this time." Puck said the beasts were approaching, and he would make a truce with Curtis to protect me together. Curtis considered it for a moment, thinking there was some truth in what Parker was saying, but he didn't say anything, just turned and picked me up, then headed deeper into the cave. Curtis also said in an overbearing manner that since they all call you Turnip, I'd better call you Bai from now on. This title is only allowed to me, to which I can only say helplessly, "As you wish." When it was time to sleep, Curtis curled his tail into a disc and lifted me up onto his body as soon as he could. I thought to myself, is Curtis showing his love? Saying something so ambiguous, afraid that Parker wouldn't get the wrong idea. Outside the cave, Parker heard the commotion inside, and hated it so much that he could only scratch the walls like crazy. I can't help that I'm only a second stripe, so I can't fight or snatch it back. Now it was left to the beloved woman to sleep on another male. The night was finally peaceful. The next morning, just as I opened my eyes, I felt the ground shake. I was scared out of my wits. What happened? Was it an earthquake? I came to the entrance of the cave, ready to find out what was going on. Only the scene before me seemed scarier than an earthquake. I met the legendary behemoths, and it turns out that the behemoths in the orc population actually referred to the dinosaurs that I've seen in sci-fi films. I was so shocked that my legs were weak, and I held onto Curtis and stammered, "Is this the behemoth you were talking about?" Suddenly, Parker appeared above the rock crevice and said to me, "I'll protect you." Curtis was trying desperately to control his anger, and I hastily snuck in a tug on Curtis' hand. I know Parker has encroached inside Curtis' territory, and he's taken it easy by not doing anything about it. The sound of the beast faded away, and my stomach growled in an untimely manner. "Let's cook," Curtis said thoughtfully. Pa hugged me and walked ahead, and Parker, pathetically, had to follow. As I panned the rice, I turned to Curtis and asked him if the behemoths were gone and wouldn't be back. "Right," Curtis said, "that's usually the case, but this one was so unusual that he didn't know if there would be a change of heart." I suddenly felt something strange in the water, and squatted down to get closer to see what was going on, and saw the reflection of a black eagle on the water surface. I had a bad feeling that it was Muir, the hawk beast who had threatened to kill himself. Before I knew it, a giant egg fell from the sky. With the sound of cracking eggshells, my face was covered in sticky egg liquid. I was furious. Was this guy Muir trying to egg me on? Curtis rushed towards me at the sight, and I looked at Curtis with a puzzled look on my face last second. The next second, he was directly grabbed by Curtis by the head, and then pressed violently into the water. One hand wasn't enough, but he pressed with both together, with an air like he was trying to drown me. I'm struggling in pain. "No, I got hit by an egg and you're drowning." Behind me, Parker saw Curtis trying to drown me and turned into a cheetah and came running wild. Curtis turned back to stare menacingly at the leopard. "Don't mess with him if you don't want him dead." I was finally able to breathe. My mouth opened in a huge gasp. Parker also stops and watches the situation from the sidelines. Just then, a keen sense of smell allowed him to catch a strong whiff of egg on me. Curtis frowned as he said that it was a behemoth egg, and most likely the egg of the behemoth king. The leopard couldn't help but feel his pupils shrinking at the words, turning his head to look at the culprit Muir, cursing in his heart. "Muir the bastard!" Curtis suddenly blanched and turned his head to the leopard and said, "Come on, they're coming."